Hello, everybody. I'm Dominic West. I played Jimmy McNulty. Isn't it astonishing how little we've all aged over the years? I'm truly sorry not to be there at this great reunion. We've been talking about a reunion for so long, and it's never happened. So thank you to Paley Fest New York for organizing this, and thank you all for coming and supporting. I'm really sorry I can't be there because some of the panel owe me money, and Seth, you owe me a flight to Los Angeles, and David, I wish we could catch up. It's been too long, and I hear you're casting your new show, but that's good luck with that. Hope that process hasn't been concluded yet. I gave David such a hard time when we were making the show because I was homesick and missed my daughter back in London, and he was constantly good about it, the fact that I kept asking for time off. But he did say eventually, with slight exasperation, in about 10 years' time, Dominic, you're going to be sitting in a bar somewhere, and you're going to be saying to anyone who'll listen, I used to be in a TV show called The Wire, and the person you're talking to will look at you sympathetically and put his arm around you and say, sir, I think you've had enough to drink. Don't you think it might be time to go home? And David, you're right. This happens to me on a weekly basis, and on a daily basis. I still get people coming up to me in the street telling me how much they love the show, and a lot of them say that they have come to it for the first time, which is astonishing when you think how long ago it was that we made the show. But I think it speaks of it, the longevity of great writing and great performances, and also they come from all walks of life. The fans of The Wire, they have one thing in common, which is that they're nice and intelligent and in great contrast to fans of other stuff I've done, perhaps. But that breadth of vision that David and Ed and all the writers had is borne out in how popular the show is and how many people it appeals to. So love to all of you there. I miss you, and I hope you all have a wonderful night celebrating what I agree with many people say is the greatest TV show ever made. See you next time.
Alan Sepinwall is the TV critic for HitFix and the author of this critically acclaimed book, The Revolution Was Televised. So please welcome Alan to the stage.
So we are very fortunate to be gathered here to be celebrating a reunion of, as Dominic said, perhaps the greatest show in the history of television. I've been in the green room, I've been in the bowels of the Paley Center with this cast. A lot of them have not seen each other basically since the show ended. They're in very high spirits. We're very looking forward to having them out. Are they? Okay, we're good to go. All right, we've got a big panel. We will start with, he played Bill Rawls, John Doman. As D'Angelo Barksdale, Lawrence Gilliard Jr. As Sergeant Ellis Carver, Seth Gilliam. As Mr. Presba, Roland Presbalewski, Jim True-Frost. As Marlo Stanfield, Jamie Hector. have to say this at least once in my life, Omar Cummin, Michael Kenneth Williams. As Detective Kima Gregg, Sonja Sohn. As the Bunk, Wendell Pierce. Executive producer, Nina Noble. And finally, of our last panelist on the stage, co-creator and executive producer, David Simon. I should say this is not a very big stage, so we actually have some additional special guests in the audience right here in the front row. Michael Lee, Tristan Wilds. And in the third row, Bob Wisdom as Bunny Colvin.
JD.
JD.
Oh, JD. I didn't see JD. Okay. As Bodie Brown, JD was not in his assigned seat. I apologize. All right, so I'm curious. When the show was originally on, how often in a given day or week did you guys wind up being recognized for being a part of it?
0.
And how often now do you guys get recognized for being on the show?
Always.
Every day. Every day.
Times a day.
Every day.
So what's it like to have worked on this show in relative obscurity at the time that has now become snowballed into this thing that is so beloved and talked about in the terms that Dominic used in the video and so many other people have, and be approached all the time about this work you did quite a while ago now?
It's terrible. Oh, it's great. It's I think especially gratifying that it keeps going. Just like Dominic was saying, it's like you get people all the time who are just saying they've just discovered it, and for that to keep happening is just like a blessing you could never even imagine.
It's very strange when you're in the middle of the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul and somebody grabs you talking in another language, but you can understand the wire. Bizarre.
I mean, for me too, I think the most pleasant thing I take away was having the experience of working with such beautiful people. I mean, that's something that I guess I wonder if anybody could ever really know is how close we were as a family and how much we supported each other and just the level of performance that we shared with each other. Man, that's the best thing I walk away with was just being grateful for having been exposed to such an awesome cast members.
I mean,
I have this mantra that it's always about the work that you do and the people that you meet.
And the relationships that you build, because I
right.
use that all the time, Wendell.
And the relationships that you build.
And all the time.
Because that's the thing that's going to last forever, whether there's a response like we have now or not. And just a few minutes ago, standing in the control room and watching the clips and then looking around the control room and seeing all these actors that I have such admiration for and realize that we were this really wonderful family. And because we didn't get recognition while we were on the air, we partied a lot. So right, we had a good time.
I wish you guys could have seen it in the elevator on the way down here. The entire cast does sing along of Way Down in the Hole. It was fabulous. David and Nina, I'm curious why you think the show has not only endured, but sort of built up in esteem and sort of awareness in the years since it was on.
I don't know, but when we started, there was
there was a sense that there was nobody really watching, but we knew that we were doing work that was important and work that was special, that we were proud of every day, I think. And as the guys said, it was an incredible family. There was camaraderie that still continues to this day, you know, that people are supporting each other still. I think that's what kind of made it special. But we were not a hit, and when The Wire first started, we still had VHS tapes. So I think that was probably part of it. It was difficult for people to follow the show from one week to the next, and once they were able to binge watch on weekends, we became more popular, I think.
David?
What show are we talking about?
The Wire, I think?
I agree with Nina. There was so little expectation. And so little, I remember our numbers came in, some of our early numbers, and Carolyn Strauss, one of the firmest supporters of the show at HBO, I expressed some dismay about how few people had watched us on a given Sunday night. And I remember, I'll never forget her quote. It was, "Oh, it's a cute little number." That's what she said. She goes, don't worry about the numbers. And it was like that. That was a window at HBO at a given moment. It was a very rare and improbable window in the entertainment industry, and I'm very grateful for it.
For the actors, I'm curious. I mean, a few of you had been on Oz. Michael, I know you'd guest starred on The Sopranos, but for most of you, this was a relatively new kind of show you were coming to. What were your expectations for it, and was there a moment at which you realized, wait a minute, I'm part of something special here?
Well, for me, I was, this was the first reoccurring character. I'd never had this much responsibility as an actor before The Wire. And I remember, I was really psyched that I was huge fans of Wendell Pearson from his past work and Sonja Song, her work on Slam. And so when I heard and Wood Harris, all I knew was those three names, and I was going to be working with these three guys. I was hooked. And then I went down to Baltimore, and I fell in love with the city. And then the whole first season, I came on as a reoccurring character, and the character, started to grow. And so I fell in love with the cast, I fell in love with the writing, I fell in love with the city. So what do? You move to Baltimore. So I was waiting for second season, like, okay, where's this storyline going? And then, I got introduced to the mind of David Simon, and he took it to the docks. And I got real bitter. I was very angry. I was the angry black man. And I approached David, in my ignorance. And I was like, how come when we made this show hot, now you want to give it to the white people? Like, this is our show. And he looked at me.
Michael, that's the way it works. I don't know where you've been the last 56 years, but that's how we do.
But that wasn't the answer. That's how we do. His answer was, he said, he looked at me with like this patience in his eyes, and he said, trust me, if we go back to the projects, right back to that storyline, he said, we're gonna make the city and this story we're trying to build here look very small. And that went way over my fucking head. Way over, But it wasn't until season 3 that things started to click. As we started going out into the public, and I started seeing how people were reacting to the show and to the character and to all the storylines. And season 3, it hit me. I was like, oh wait, this is not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about my career. It has and I felt instead of being arrogant and ignorant, I became very humble and grateful to be a small part of this huge picture. Mm-hmm. And that stayed with me throughout the rest of the season of The Wire.
At first, it was a shock. David always said to us, this is a novel. It is a visual novel, and just like novels, you're building the characters, you're building the world, so just be patient. All the pieces matter and all the pieces fit.
I just want to add, Michael's saying it's not about me. I want to say, having grown up in Baltimore, living 10 years in Baltimore, a part of it was about me, And so you know, when I remember getting the script, my agent called knowing that I'd grown up in Baltimore. He's like, you won't believe HBO's doing this thing, you won't believe where it is happening in Baltimore. And so I get it and I read it and I literally know the streets. Like, I know the people. And I remember feeling just like, I've got to get this. If I don't get anything else, I got to get this one. Because this, you know, it's like, it's talking to me. He's talking about me. And so when I did, I was fortunate, blessed enough to get the part, and I went and did it. And I want David to know that I've been spoiled ever since. Because the writing was just so incredible. When I read it, I knew, because you asked if we knew it was something special. I knew from the first page that it was something special. And I knew that I had to up my game because of how special it was.
I really feel bad that we killed you the second season. If you're gonna be that
sorry,
gracious,
I gotta go down
I really
here.
have
David.
to.
All forgiven. All forgiven.
See, we know the backstory to this little hog. My heart just fell to the floor. How beautiful. Because we all were in our own little worlds, you know, at this time. A lot of us were just really beginning our careers. This was the first steady gig that we'd had, you know.
Me too.
Yeah. So we did a lot of growing together. We did a lot of discovery together. We learned a lot about the business together. We learned when we were important, when we weren't. And I'd like to just sort of tag on to what Larry was saying. You know, only I think Michael and Andre, and maybe you knew how much this story was resonating, you know, my own life. And in a way it was about me, but I wasn't even clear at the time. You know, I came into the show just like everybody else. I was like, hey, paycheck, because I hadn't had a job in 2 years. And Andre was one of the few, he was the only person that I really knew coming into the show. And I remember we saw the pilot. The pilot was shot. Were you there?
Yes.
So Andre was like, yeah, we can go in the conference room, we can see the pilot. I was like, okay, so.
Me, Andre Royo, and Sonja Sonn like this.
Oh, you were there too?
I was there that day too.
Were you there when we fell on the So we're looking at the pilot. We're like, okay,
And it
because
ended.
I didn't get it. It ended.
And we're like, oh, Lord, save your money. This ain't going nowhere.
He went, oh my God. We were like, oh my God, this is going.
I gotta.
We were like, oh my God. But Wendell, you said no. See, Wendell, to me, Larry, I didn't know you knew that this was something special because a lot of us were like, oh, I don't know, it's kind of slow. But Wendell you were one of the first people within the first 3 episodes, I think, that were like, no, guys. And you know, Wendell became kind of like your voice to the actors, David, explaining to us that it was this novel and that there was an impact to it.
That was just hope. I was just.
No. Absolutely.
In the meantime, I was calling my agent, like, listen, call Law and Order. I'm gonna be free in about 2 weeks.
Following up on that, Wendell, you talked before about David's idea that this is a visual novel, and often the thing I hear from people is I really needed to get to episode 4, episode 5, before I could actually understand what was happening, who all these people were. You guys had the scripts, but did any of you have the same problem, just sort of keeping track of the story early on, or was it easy for you?
I had to watch the show with subtitles for like the first 7 episodes.
And I don't know what scripts you're talking about. We usually saw the script the day we were shooting it.
It wasn't that bad.
2 days before. It was about 2 days before.
And, you know, fortunate for me, when I came on in season 3, I got a chance to see most of the story before that, so I jumped on board immediately. The part that resonated with me was when Michael B. Jordan's character was murdered. Mm-hmm. And, you know, my manager, Allie, she saw it and she looked at it and she said, she just called me and said, you see this show on TV? It's amazing. I mean, it's honest to what's going on out here. And as soon as I turned it on and saw it, it was a go. And then when we went into the room and I met with David and Nina, and they said we got the part, it was just it was a moment I guess for me, just the same way that everybody else felt, because it was my first series regular.
Now, there's a famous scene in the show that Wendell's in the fourth episode where basically only one word is said and many variations of it over and over. How long did it take you guys to get used to both the level and the creativity of the profanity in the show?
Fucking easy. No, David came to us one night we were shooting. He said, I'm writing this scene. This is what's going to happen. You're going to go over it and all. He said, you know, we're going to get a lot of pushback on the language that we use, so we might as well just go for it. We're going to do this entire scene, but the only word you're going to say is fuck. And we went, well, okay. And it was great to work on. My one disappointment in that scene is the actual super had the last line in the original script. It was all written out, too.
Yeah, he did.
Which was great. It was a great acting exercise. It's one of the scenes I'm proudest of. But we look for it, we find the casing, you know, fuck, oh, motherfuck, fuckity fuck, all of that. Then we look and then at the end, when I find the casing, the super goes, motherfucker. and that didn't last, but we had a great time doing it.
John, you're introduced, memorably flipping McNulty, the double bird, and
Double bird.
Rawls was particularly creative in his use of the language. How did you try to approach that as an actor?
Well, I heard a lot of that language growing up as a kid around, the Fishtown section of Philadelphia, which is not that far from Baltimore, but it was a pretty salty area. So, I could pick up the rhythm fairly easily.
and he was a Marine, so, they've been known to occasionally, Marines,
Yeah.
utter a curse word or two. Just, now and then.
Now, the other notable language, obviously, is the jargon that both the cops and the crooks use. Were any of you particularly either adept at it, or did any of you really struggle with just sort of mastering the lingo and getting it out and understanding what it was supposed to be?
I knew it, so it was easy for me. What was amazing to me was that it was on the page, because you don't read, it was all on the page. So I didn't read a lot of scripts where I'm like, I talk like that. That's exactly what I'd say. It was just awesome.
In all honesty, for the most part, I thought it was a mistake. Right, Tristan? Look, I read it. And I'm like, hold on, they said this wrong. This is not said correctly. And then as we went through it, and then I heard, Micah was actually working on the character also, his Baltimore accent, and it was not two, it was two. I spoke to David. David said it's not Baltimore, Jen, it's Baltimore. I said,
Some New Yorkers say dog. Say dog.
Dog.
Doug.
Dog.
Doug.
That was definitely something I was very adamant about. That David gave me the ability to choose whether I wanted him to sound like a Baltimorean or a dude from Brooklyn, and I chose the Baltimore dialect. And if you really listen, season 1 and 2, I struggle. I come in and out. I would say it was in the pocket for me by season 3. I felt like I really understood the language, because I was living in Baltimore. I spent a lot of time with the people in the city, and it just kind of resonated in me. And I feel by season 3 it was in the pocket for me.
Now, Jamie mentioned before Michael B. Jordan. Wallace's death is one of the big moments in the first season, and then that leads to a moment we got to see in the clip reel before, Where's Wallace? Lawrence, what was it like on the set that day doing that scene?
The Where's Wallace?
Yeah.
It was just a tense day, you could feel it in the air, I could, anyway. And another part of me, just as an actor, I wanted to get it right. It was a powerful, powerful moment, and I wanted to get it right. I wanted to get it right for the fans. I wanted to get it right for David. I wanted to get it right for Michael. And yeah, there was I'd probably say I was just scared. I was scared all day. Like, I can't fuck this up, But the director was really cool. He would come over, I remember he would come over and he wouldn't say much. He'd come over and he'd go. He'd do one of those. And I go, okay. And then I'd do it, and then he'd come back and he'd go. And I go, all right.
Who directed that?
Is that Ernest?
What's his name?
Ernest Dickinson.
No, Ernest didn't do that. That was Canadian brother.
Oh,
Clement.
Clement, yes.
Now, David, so the show gets a lot of power over the years with the repetition of language, sometimes like at the beginning of the season and the end. In that scene, it's the one line being said over and over and over again. Why did you decide?
I didn't decide. We wrote it like a couple of times in the script. It's repeated a couple of times, but the explosion from Larry was, Idris and Larry, they found that together. And when it happened, it wasn't, there was no implication of it on the page. But once it happened, it was just like, of course. I can't take credit for that at all.
Now, speaking of Idris, I believe we have a surprise message from Mr. Elba, if you can put that up on the screen.
Isn't he James Bond yet?
Hello, Paley Fest 2014. The Wire. Big shout out to my Wire team. How you doing, guys? I wish I could have been there today. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm somewhere very exotic, as you can tell from my background. I was actually asked to say a lot and, do a speech, but like Stringer Bell, I don't like phones, so I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I just want to say thank you for the Paley Fest for throwing this together. This group of people in here are amazing, and we are privileged to be in the same room, except I'm not in the room. But anyway, David Simon, you're a genius. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to build Stringer Bell. What a character. That character defined a certain point in my career and continues to do that. Every meeting I take, someone references that character. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here today, audience. The Wire team love you as you love The Wire. And, I'm going to say goodbye because I think the feds are coming. Love.
David, I know a lot of the characters on the show, including Avon, had real-life inspirations. Was there a real-life Stringer, or was it entirely an invention?
He was based on a character who was sort of a number two to Melvin Williams in a case that Ed Burns did, named Chin Farmer, Lamont Farmer.
Okay.
It means nothing to anybody, but if you're from Baltimore, you'll still not really get the reference. Which is a tribute to the character, if you think about it. It's like, he was the kind of guy who could have a whole career and not many people would know about him.
Now, Michael referenced earlier, sort of, you come back in season 2 and everything is upended. McNulty's on the boat. We're now focusing on Sabatka and the dock workers. A lot of the characters who were very prominent in season 1 are in the background. D'Angelo's in jail. Were any of the rest of you sort of concerned, like, what's going on here? What's happening to my character? Or had you learned to roll with it by that point?
But Seth, you gotta go. Seth and Dominic Lombardozzi, you got to tell the story, Seth. I leave it to you.
Yeah, we were shooting a lot of second unit with Robert Colesbury, who I think was trying to keep us entertained after a while. We were taking like lots of shots of spider webs and slow walking track. It's like, is there even film in that camera? What the fuck are we doing here? It's like George Steinbrenner. I'm going to find these fantastic guys who always beat the Yankees. I'm going to sign them to these contracts and sit them on the fucking bench. It's like, what is the point of this? We want to perform. We're down here. So we decided we were going to make some phone calls and we were going to address the issue with David directly. And it was basically like, you know what? I'll quit. Fuck you. I don't need this show. Y'all are wasting me. You know what you have here? We will walk, man. We ain't had nowhere to walk. We ain't have shoes. But we were set to go. We felt it was so incredibly frustrating. It was like, no, there's going to be a big payoff at the end of the season. Yeah, the end of the season.
Boy, you cheated it. You cheated.
Yeah, you give it to us, David, please. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay, so they come in and they make their big pitch, and all the shots were. Remember, they were doing like all this surveillance. In fact, that we were like making like they just sat on houses, and they were coming up with nothing and nothing. Finally, they sit on a house. And the guy, it was Nikki's spot, he's already been arrested. Like he was arrested in the previous episode. They're still sitting on the house because nobody told them he was arrested. You remember that?
Yeah.
So at some point they come in and they say, you know, Dom and Seth come in. They're like, look, nothing's happening with our characters. We're not being developed. We don't feel like we're being properly used, that we're being effectively used in whatever it is you're building. And I go, just like these two guys in the case, they're getting frustrated, right? He goes, yeah, but what I'm saying is, you know, I called my agent. I go, so you're really frustrated, right? Now do you remember the conversation? Like, yeah. So these guys, they really feel as if they're being, you know, neglected. Right. He goes, yes, they do. And there came this moment where I said, use it. I promise. and so, you know, he took the sergeants. We know where it went. But
yeah, Dom Lombardozzi was really buoyed by that. I was not so much. Yeah, he was like, no, it makes perfect sense. You know what I mean? I wish they would have trusted us a little more with telling us what was going on with our characters. You know what I mean? That would have been good, but this is fucking great, though. This is fucking great. It's gonna turn into something, man. It's gotta turn into something. I will fucking knock David Simon out.
So 50% penetration on my bullshit is pretty good. I turned one of you.
Exactly.
Nina, how did the relationship between the show and the city of Baltimore change over the years, or was it roughly the same in terms of your interactions with politicians and other people?
Well, it was easy the first season because we were mostly filming in abandoned row houses where there was really nobody to ask permission, even if we wanted to. You know, we would look around for homeowners, but often, you know, it's just a matter of taking down the boards and going in and filming. And then second season, David and Ed came up with the story of the port, and so we went to the port, and you know, we said we want to do this story about these women, you know, in a can that are come up dead. And they said, no, thank you. We really don't want to be involved in that. Thanks anyway. So that was a new experience for us, being turned down, and me having to tell David, you know, you can't shoot anywhere you want in Baltimore, you know, even though you think you can. So that was a process of talking our way back in there. But you know, and then there was the politics and certain people who thought some of the characters were maybe based on them, and that made life a little rough for us at times. But I think for the most part, I think we pretty much flew under the radar for the most part. I mean, there are politicians in Baltimore that still haven't gotten over it, and in fact, the entire film industry in Baltimore kind of collapsed because of us.
Yeah. I don't know if it was all us, but we probably contributed in some way in that the guy who became the governor, who felt a particular animus to the show, when the chips were down in 2008 and he had to cut his budget, one of the things he cut was the film incentives. And you know, if you know anything about how the film industry works, a lot of business left Maryland. And I couldn't help but think it was such a bad decision because you know the incentives. It's basically you don't get a tax give back until you're paying in. You know, it's not a. You're not giving anything. You're not giving anything out that's not a percentage of everything that's coming in. It was such a terrible decision, but he was extremely emotional about The Wire. He's running for president now, so you know, I'm sure you all have a chance to engage with him on.
Here's a softball. What character did he think he was?
He was the bunk. Born politician.
What was it like for you as actors to be living in this city and going around in it as the show was on, and especially as it went on in years and more people got to know it? Did the citizens of Baltimore seem sort of possessive of you, or how did that go?
The people of Baltimore are great. I love Baltimore. It was what I look forward to every year. You know, I knew I was going to get a new apartment in a different part of town, and we were going to be hanging out. And I loved this. There was this one club. And you know, people started to see you in the characters that you were, you know, and so everybody thought I was real police. So I would dress up in a suit and tie and go to Choices. The Choices was on
North Street.
North Street, yeah.
Charles Street.
And you know that it was like I met.
Going to Choices?
I loved going into Choices.
I got violated in Choices.
Yeah. It was a whole, there were a whole lot of Omars and Barksdales and everybody in choices. Oh man, and they were like bunk. You know, all these kids would come up. Yeah, you real police? I'll take you out. You know. But it was great. So you had that experience, but then I also got to know a lot of the real police and doing ride-alongs and with detectives. One in particular was Sergeant Massey, who, you know, he was always clean. He, you know, always suit and tie and straight up, and he would love to interrogate people, you know, in front of me. Let me show you all the tricks of the trade, you know. And then I also met the real Bunk, and that was great. Right at the beginning of the show, I meet the real Bunk and in the courthouse, and Rick Requier, and I'll never forget the first day we were shooting. He came in his caddy with his big cigar, drove up and parked in the distance, and got out as the Bunk, and looked at me. Got back in his car and drove off. And after that, that was the first day, and I didn't talk to him for 5 years. But I was terrified of what his review was going to be, and I was in the barbershop one time, and the guy said, you know, the Bunk is retiring. And I said, oh, no, I got to go. So I went there, man, and I walk in, and he's standing there and looking at me the same way. And then he finally said, oh, boy, you made me a star. Come here. And we're actually going to hook up for the Baltimore Saints game on November 21st in New Orleans. So I'm still in touch with the Bunk.
Yeah. I wonder if there was, I imagine you guys get this a lot in terms of just confusing you with the character. I'm wondering if it was more for those of you who played cops or those of you who played criminals, where it's just, they have difficulty separating the actor and the character.
I had a few kids on the subway in New York say, aren't you my teacher? You're my teacher. I had you for 5th grade, right? So I was definitely confused for a teacher.
For me, it wasn't so much the cop thing. It was like, you really like that? I mean, you know, you like that? I mean, you know, because I think you're sexy. So it was all about, you know, are you a lesbian or aren't you a lesbian? They knew I wasn't a cop.
I've had many cops come up to me and say, I work for an asshole just like you.
I don't know, Jamie, did you get a lot of people just sort of having trouble separating fact from fiction?
I mean, you know, for the most part, I think everybody thought I sold drugs, and they would ask me if I want to move a package or two. Just simple things like that. But, yeah.
And what did you tell them?
Of course.
All right, so you talked before about what it was like to come into the show later in the run. Most of you on the stage here were on the show from the first season. We have a couple people in the audience who came in later, both Tristan and Bob. What was it like for the two of you to join this show after it had been on for a few years?
Can I just say something real quick? I just want to acknowledge my wife, Michelle Paris, who also played Alma Gutierrez in the show.
Yeah. Right.
Right there. Because she came in much later on the end. Yeah.
Check 1 2. Coming into the show late, it was crazy because me and my mom watched it. You know, that was probably like one of our Sunday rituals. She got me on to like season 3, and then I think that was around the time that HBO On Demand came out, so I was able to go back and watch like the first and second season. And then I remember it was when Stringer died, and then, you know, a year later they have these auditions, and my mom's like, oh, The Wire's having auditions. I'm like, where are they gonna go now? Like, Stringer's dead. There's nothing else to show.
Spoken like Chris Albrecht.
But you know, then I went out for the audition, and I just, because I already knew the character, I already knew the place. Like, I knew the whole scope of the show. I was so excited to be a part of it.
Good. Bob?
So, yeah, it was a strange kind of thing, because I had gone up for The Corner, and I wasn't able to do it because this movie came through. But The Corner was like, I knew those rocks. I mean, you know, Baltimore, D.C., I grew up in D.C. So when that came around, I was doing this movie, Ray. We were down in New Orleans, and and like everyone else, I became a fan of the show. I'd originally gone up for Stringer Bell, so go figure. But, you know, and actors have this thing where, you know, if they don't get the part, they don't watch the show.
Thank you. Now I don't have to,
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, but when, you know, I became a fan of the show like 3-4 episodes in. So I was, you know, when it came up, I told my agent, don't screw this up. You know, and I went to set, and I remember David and Robert walked me in the trailer, and it was the end of season 2, and they presented this character, and the character was in a whole bunch of scenes but didn't have a lot of words, and I was like, you know, feeling like Larry, like, what the fuck's going on? You know? But after I went back and looked at it, the whole skeleton of the character was right there in the end of that second season. I mean, everything was there. The looks they guided me to, all of this stuff, and that's when I knew we were on to something. You know, it was one of those kind of movies.
Now, the show added people over the years. Of course, it also lost people over the years. We have a couple on stage who were killed off. Bodie, we lost tragically at the end of season 4. I'm curious, JD, what's it like? Pass it on down to JD. Yeah. I'm curious, from your point of view, what's it like to be killed on the wire? Like, when did you find out? Is there any kind of ritual that happens?
Well, I'm glad you got that one.
Yeah, I think in general, I'm pretty sure most people probably didn't get too much advance notice before you got taken off. But I think there's tiers to it, and there's some characters, like you might have a fruit per se, and maybe like the way he was taken out was kind of a little more graphic or, you know, brutal. I have to really thank David for the way he handled Bodie, because I felt like I got special treatment the way it was going down. Like, it was pages coming out, and he would just send them, they would be messengered, and then he would pull me to the side, and we would talk, and he would, you know, start explaining things to me like a little bit earlier. And it was like this extra secrecy around it, actually. So I felt really, you know, taken really well care of as an actor and as a character. And by the time it was time for my character to go, like, the buildup of it was just so... It was time, you know. I was ready as an actor, and I was ready as a character. I remember I was doing a lot of scenes with the younger kids that last season, and I mean, I hung out with them a lot. Like, we spent the whole lot of time together hanging out. We had a ball, and at lunchtime they would sit with me most of the time, and we would talk about the characters as I do about the story as I do with the older characters. But the young ones, they would say, "Well, what you think is going to happen?" And I would say, "Well, I think Bodie's going to get killed this year." And they would all say, "Don't say that out loud. Don't say that." And like, David's sitting right over there. He might hear you. Like, but, you know, that's the way I feel like the character's going to go. That's what's going to happen. And I remember David sat with us one day, and I said it in front of him. And I mean, I saw all of their eyes just pop out of their head, like, why is he killing himself right now? But it was just a thing to where I felt like I said, the project as itself was alive, and it was breathing, and there was just so much love and respect that I felt like it was time, and I love the way it was going, and I couldn't ask for a better ensemble.
JD took it best of anybody. Not only what you left out is JD really took it best as anybody. He like, normally you had to do a little bedside manner, like, hey, you know, but it's a good death scene, you know. But JD was like, he guessed it. Like, at some point, he's looking at one of those scenes with McNulty. It wasn't the big one in the Arboretum. It was the one a little earlier.
We eating?
Yeah, in Bill's, in the sub shop. And he said, "I'm having this much words with a cop, and you know, there's like," and you actually said, you know, like, on this show, once characters start raising up and having like a little bit of respect for each other, that's when the bullet comes. He said, "So I know I don't have long." Like, he actually guessed it. I was like, well, I wouldn't say you don't have long. All of a sudden, I was like backing up on it, because Tom Fontana, a guy who mentored me in television, and Nina as well, he said something to me one time. He said, you know, he said, if you tell an actor, you know, episodes in advance, or, you know, then all of a sudden, everything in the scripts leading up to that, every single line, you know, pass the potatoes, might be the last time you ever taste potatoes, man. Like, it's even for trained, you know, actors. measuring everything against the fact that, human beings don't know their own death. They don't know the moment of their own death. So that's why we go, if we did, we could barely go through the day. So it's the kind of thing that, like, yeah, I had a lot of moments of coming to guys' trailers with the newly published script, 2 days before, and going, good news and bad news. I had that, but there really was a method to the cruelty.
And something that Sonja started also, which is we started to realize that people are doing really great work, and this was a special time. And when that moment came, out of respect for the work that the actors were doing, we missed a couple, but we said we need to go and show support. And I remember Sonja would really gather us and say, they're shooting his death scene this day. Let's try to make it out. It's going to take a couple of hours. So over the course of those hours, we would go. Out of respect for the actor and the work that they've done, and that was a tradition that Sonja started that I really loved.
I think we all. No, go ahead, Nina.
No, I just wanted to say it was amazing how much of a family we all were. That after, a whole season. I remember also everyone's last scene of the season, because we never knew if we were coming back. We were never renewed. And so we were all saying goodbye at the end of every single year. And everybody would show up for everybody's last scene, and there would be a lot of goodbyes, and we hope we see you again, and this happened for 5 years. And actually the 5th season we thought we were canceled. I mean, and everybody was like, oh.
Yeah, I gotta say that. Yeah, there came a moment where they delayed the decision on whether we were ever coming back until after the actors' contracts lapsed, meaning we were not holding anybody. And I had to call everybody and say, if we're gonna finish the show, everyone's gonna have to come back. And not only that, like, they're trimming a couple of episodes, they gotta come back. Like, we can't just pay out everybody for 12 if we're only shooting 10. We don't have the money, because they held their budget. So it was like, on the one hand, I'm telling HBO, listen, if it's about that, I'm actually acting like, if it's about the actors, they'll all come back to a man. I'm saying this, but I'm not sure we actually believed it until we actually put the calls out to a man. And we didn't, there wasn't.
Every single person came back and said we're there.
Said we're there, and nobody tried to, like, okay, I'm free. I want, send a bigger trailer, and I want a bigger car. There was nothing of that. It was all like, this is the work,
The other thing that happened was that the actors operated as a department like on no other show that I've ever been on. There was a time when, everybody brought their game to the show, and everybody had to every day. It's, Larry and Seth, you've said it, everybody had, and Michael, everybody had felt the burden of responsibility that was on each one of you and each one of us to make this thing happen. It took everybody working together. But there was a time when there was an actor that was coming and maybe not so prepared as he used to be. I think in the 4th season, he'd show up and sometimes not know his lines that well. And I thought, because one of my many jobs is to make sure that everyone else is doing their job. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have the talk. I'm going to have to go in there and say, you really have to. And before I had a chance to do that, we were shooting at a hotel. And it was some ungodly hour, 2 in the morning or whatever. And all of a sudden, I realized that, where are the actors? Well, they're all in this one hotel room. And there was like a lot of you there, even ones that weren't working. And everyone went into this one room. Do you guys remember this, when you staged the intervention? There was an intervention, yeah. And I wasn't in the room, but suddenly there was no problem anymore.
I've never had a self-policing cast.
But it was pretty incredible.
It was amazing. I mean, they were self-policing. There was
some people like, man, don't mess up my job.
No, but
it was
there's
all
sort of
love.
a little perfect storm that's come together for me to tell a story. The way we handled death, death was ever present on this show, of course. And for me especially, I was able to kind of rise to the occasion because I was the first one to escape a bullet during when I found out. David, you mind if I share this?
No, go ahead.
When I found out accidentally during the last, I think just before I was about to shoot my last scene of the pilot, when I go to meet Melanie, and Melanie, my girlfriend, Cheryl, for the first time, and we're all like, having, giggles. And she says, yeah, I really wanted the role of Kima. And I was like, oh, no, but you got a great role. And I'm just kind of, letting that trickle off my back and trying to move forward. And she said, but yeah, the director told me that, the characters died in the 5th episode. Anyway, so. And I went, what? Kaplop. And David and I, have a whole, conversation, around it. But
yes,
I guess.
Did.
What?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we have a big and again, and David has one of these moments where he talks about the importance of it. It's going to resonate some larger theme. She's the moral center of the police department, whatever. And I really don't give a shit at this point because I just come off of 2 years of unemployment, and now going, oh fuck, what am I going to do now? But I think having been in that position was really interesting for me. I think it taught me about this business, first of all. And whenever an actor was going to die or heard that they were going to die or whatever, I tried to help them understand that it's not to take it personally. It's not about, it's not about the David or, the writers. It's a story. We're here to serve a story. And then I think also what happened, what we started to see was we became so close. I had such a rough time that first season. Most of the people who worked in scenes with me, I know you knew. I know you knew because we talked about it. You had to see it because you were in the room. That first season was torture for me. I would study my lines for hours, for a whole weekend, and come to this set and just draw blanks. Later, after the show ended, I realized what had happened. This story was resonating some sort of unfinished business in my own life. My brother had been a teenage drug dealer. My brother had been murdered. The low-rises looked a lot like the apartment complex I grew up in, and I was basically being triggered. And my work wasn't there. And these guys, they were the first to be there for me. Andre held me down. We had some conversations. You and I had some conversations, but Andre held me down. Kept me in there. I wanted to quit. I was about to quit. I was like, fuck the money. This is not worth it. I'm suffering. I'm drowning. And I think because I had both of those experiences, when we became close. And like I said, we were growing and developing and learning all together, having shit fits over stuff. You would never do that on a set now. When these things happen with your character, you know the business now, right? We didn't know the business back then, But we were all bonding over some, over death. Which I think was resonating for all of us, differently. And because we had such a strong bond, we wanted to honor each other. And it was a beautiful experience, and it's something that I don't think will ever be repeated in my career.
I'll tell you now, Sonja, that the person who really did the most talking, who saved your character, was Carolyn Strauss at HBO. Mm-hmm. Carolyn Strauss, because she knew the storyline. It wasn't actually episode 5, it was later in the run, but when you got shot, originally we'd conceived of it as that you would be killed.
Yeah.
And Carolyn got to about episode 6, watching cuts of the show. I don't think we'd quite aired yet, maybe it was about episode 5. And she said, don't be killing Kima. Don't be killing Kima.
When I was having a
do you want to have a show? Do you? She didn't say that, but she loved the character. She loved what you did with it, and she was like, "That's a mistake. That's a mistake."
Girl power. And trust me, as we were shooting that season, and I was screwing it up, okay? Because David said, "Listen, There's someone, you did tell me, there's someone high up in the food chain that really loves this character, so the jury's still out on that. And when we come back,
That's what I told you when you called me on the phone. I said,
if we come back.
yeah, we're still arguing over it.
Yeah. You know, I should know. But I tell you something, as I was screwing it up, you know, and you can see it on the dailies, but you know, y'all cut it together real nice, thank you. You know, I had that. I was like, when she got shot, I was like, shit, is she gonna die? Did I really screw it up? But yeah, you know, we went through a lot together. It was a beautiful experience.
And we were fans of each other's work. I mean, as a homicide detective, I never saw any of these guys. Never until they were down and dead, you know? Then I had a great scene, you know, my great scene with Idris. Oh, yep, yeah, he dead. But you know, I mean, I was such a fan of the show because of that. I mean, because we were working in silos, partying together, though.
Right.
It's a great time, but you know, things just constantly resonated. I mean, one of my favorite moments is, you know, when Seth is in the hospital with Randy, you know, and he walks away. That moment, I told him downstairs, you know, what now, Sergeant Carver? I mean, that kills me every time.
And I have to say,
you know, Bob with the bottle in the bag speech. You know, I mean, it's just constant moments. Larry with pawns. You know, you're the pawn. The king is the, you know.
King stay the king.
King stay the king.
King stay the king.
And it's just amazing moments like that that fans have pointed out that we actually appreciated while they were happening. That you know we'll never forget. I mean, when Presbo is giving everything to Dookie.
Yeah.
You know?
It's crazy. It's like, because it crosses over seasons. It's like the family.
Yeah.
It crosses over seasons. There are people who I didn't work with because I was done when I was done, who were in season 4. I remember meeting this cat here, and you know, he started in season 4. He come up as just like a little brother. It's like we're all a part of the family.
Right.
And it's just such a special thing. I've never experienced that ever.
And one.
No, go ahead.
You know, one thing that I realized also when working on going into the 4th season, I looked at the pages and I said, David and Nina, that's the real Marlowe. They putting people in row houses based on the material that I read. And the reason why I thought that is because the line that I said, my name is my name. One thing you have to understand, we're fans of these guys on the set because they kind of move in silence, right? So it's Ed Burns, David Simon, Nina K. Nobles that barely ever speak. And as an actor, you want to be directed by directors. You want them to give you a direction. So for that scene right there, Nina came over and she barely ever spoke, never said a word, right? Oh, no, they would stand there and just watch. You know what you're doing, just do it. But for that scene, she came and she said, Jamie, let me talk to you. And I said, hey, she said, for this scene right over here, it's as if Goldman Sachs was being ran through trash and somebody was talking about them and tearing them down and they had to stand up for their name. I was never directed by this lady. She barely ever spoke on set. Then she gave me that word, right? So in silence, watching these guys move in silence, watching them barely say anything, and then her giving me the word is actually the thing also that motivated and inspired me to do the work that I did on that show and in that scene.
That sets us up nicely. We have a question here that was submitted via the Paley app. They want to know, is there one scene that any of you were involved in that you feel really encapsulates what The Wire was about?
Ooh. Man, it's too much.
It's a big one.
One.
I had a thought. You know, it wasn't a big scene, but it does encapsulate the ensemble nature of the thing for me. I was, you know, up till season 3 in this on the detail, and then in season 4 I'm in the schools, and there was this great moment where Bunk and Freeman come to the school to ask about Randy, and we have this really well-written, beautiful scene with some real acting demands, and it was like something I just could not have even imagined could ever take place, you know, both because of the depth of the work that was required, even though it wasn't like a lot of fireworks. It was just really intense, you know, toe-to-toe acting, and it was like with this huge arc of my character going from being a police to being in the schools, and then facing some old colleagues, you know, it was all wrapped up.
If I could offer, I had the privilege of working with, at that time, the kids in year 4. Extraordinary, incredible group of kids. Kids, yes, sir. I don't call you kid anymore, though. But we were working in the classroom with, my classroom was a group of raw kids. The ones who carried big roles had some training behind them and they were rolling, but these kids were raw. And there was a day that this one in the storyline when one of my students, who was just on the fence, he was a pretty good kid, but he had his ways. He goes home and he finds his grandma dead on the couch. And he had to carry this. And the late great Robert Cole, God bless him, was working with them. And we all went into this room with him to just really, I think it was probably no more than 9, 10, to really dig up these really deep emotions so he could carry that. And this guy went there. And it was like this incredible moment in this closet that we sort of just eased out into the classroom, and take after take after take, he was in that place. And I think that's what The Wire, if you can say that, it said everything right there. That's what we were about.
We used a lot of people who were just Baltimoreans, and in increasingly significant roles. I mean, we had a lot of trained, talented actors who would often be put in scenes. I remember you were famously put in a scene where everywhere you looked, it was the pool. Yeah, I remember that scene. It was like you could go too far, but there were these moments that it made the thing feel real because there was this this permeable or semi-permeable membrane between the artifice of making a television show and the real city that we were filming in and about. And so there would be these moments of, when it worked, it was magical, like, with Felicia. But sometimes we got ourselves in trouble. We'd look around and say, a real actor might help in this moment. but every now and then, it was worth the experiment. And it sort of brings up something, rather than try to pick a scene, which is, because that to me, the whole, let's pick a scene, which season is the favorite, which actor, could Stringer beat up McNulty if they were on, It's like, I listen to this shit and it's just like, wow, that's where it all, it all gets driven into its little components. But the real joy of doing this stuff, long form, is that it survives, if it survives long enough so that it builds to something where you actually can make a complete universe and have the universe argue something or discuss something. And for that, every single person up here, the writers, the producers, the directors who are not represented tonight, but certainly the entire cast, down to all the departments, the amazing thing about film, that it's unlike, because you remember, I come out of prose, I come out of journalism and then book writing. And there it's just, it's you and your editor and maybe a copy desk looking over the editor's shoulder, and that's the story. It's, it's right here, I can show it to you, it's a paper. But this is so collaborative, and it's so much bigger than the sum of any of us. And we're all, I used to have this metaphor, I used to tell it to everybody, but it sounds almost dehumanizing, but I don't mean it that way. It's like we're building a house, and we're all tools in a toolbox. And some of us are like, here's a level, here's an awl, here's a ball peen hammer. We all can do certain specialized things very well, but it doesn't work unless everybody sort of just kicks. And we're all very proud, and we're all very, we have certain talents that we're proud of and we worked hard at. But you got to sort of put the ego and sort of like, just shut up for a while because we're doing something here, And all of us. I mean, I was in a writer's room with, Richard Price and Pelicanos and Dennis Lehane. I had a writer's room, like, there were times where I was sort of like, is Philip Roth here? Who didn't show up today? It was like, and all of us would have to say to each other, sometimes, nah, that sucks, or that we can do better than that, or no, you're wrong, and we'd have to have arguments, and that I admire that so much because I thought after The Wire that, well, now I know how you get that mad. Now I can do that every time. We'll have another show and everybody will get along and everyone will behave and nobody will argue for a bigger trailer and and it was pretty. I've worked with a lot of other good people on other shows and things have turned, but there's something happened somewhere along the line. And it felt like everybody sort of knew that something bigger than the sum of the parts had a chance of happening.
And the authenticity of it, it speaks to such a truth and humanity. Someone was saying how John and everyone was saying how people from different walks of life come and say to us as actors, I love The Wire, you know, and they speak as if it only spoke to them. If you can understand, I understand how it spoke to you. And it would be, you know, some little old lady on the Upper East Side, or, you know, some, you know, kid slinging on the corner, you know. That's the thing that makes it classic. You know, it speaks to the humanity of the characters and the world that David created, so much so that it's classic. It's going to speak to human beings after us. And you're still, so it's hard to say just one scene in The Wire. It's the complexity of The Wire that makes it last on and on and on, and that complexity speaks to so much of our humanity, that different people from different walks of life, a disparate group of people, come to it and speak, and it says it speaks to them in a very special way. And almost to a person, we could go through scene after scene after scene of saying, this is really about The Wire, this is about The Wire, this is about The Wire. And I came to that realization when I actually considered leaving The Wire. Because I can say publicly right now, I know we have favorite seasons and stuff, but with the kids in the schools, that's the best examination of the dysfunction of what's happening in our society ever depicted on screen. And I had very little, as being a homicide detective, I had very little to do with the live kids. But it was it was at the rap party when the young lady, and I can't think of her name and I can't think of the character's name, who slices the girl's face, came up to me, Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to work with you this year. This was really great. You know, I'm so excited about being on the show. And, you know, I'm going to Brown next year on scholarship. And I'm like, whoa, who are you? You know? Who are you on the show? You know, and she said, I played Zenobia or whatever, you know. Yeah, you know, and I was like, well, that's the girl who slices the face. And I remember saying, wait a minute, why aren't we telling your story? You're going to Brown on honors and all, you know? Right. And I was really like, man, are we a part of the problem? You know? And then I went back and watched that season and realized that it was so impactful and touching to me that I knew we weren't arbitrary with the choices that we were making about the violence, about this dysfunction and everything, that actually we were telling stories that need to be told and that will speak for a long time. And those kids touched me so much, you know. Touched me so much. What now, Sergeant Carver? What now?
We are going to go to audience Q&A in just a moment, so think up some good ones. But before we do that, David, what you were talking about before made me wonder. I know you've sort of said you don't really have an interest in bringing back the show, but do you ever find yourself just as a writer thinking to yourself, you know, I wonder what this character's up to now, I wonder what that character's up to now, do any of you as actors?
Now, you know, listen, you can, the stories work if they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we really did plan the end. The end had to be the end. And the last thing we wanted to say, in a fundamental way, was, why is it that, you know, there's a million channels, there's 100 million channels, and there's all this entertainment. We're a culture that's pretty much entertained ourselves to death, and there was this one show for a little while that, you know, I used to be very proud when people like Andre would come out of, or Michael, or it was usually the street characters, but it could often be the detectives too. They would come out of the trailer and we'd be shooting somewhere in West Baltimore. And it would be like, you know, we're on Calhoun Street or something. And they'd come out and there was like, somebody finally made a television show about this America. It was like, all of a sudden, it was like to see people rally around, you know, Andre Royo, you know, yo, Bubs, you know, like, and they would come and they would like bleed out their stories to, you know, about cousin, and it was just so beautiful. It was like nothing, there's a whole universe that isn't sufficient for narrative in most people's minds. And this show was a very improbable thing that managed to last for a while. And that to me was, it was important to, like, the reason it ended with the media, the reason that we ended with the idea of the storytelling and the newspaper, the reason that had to be the last season was because, you know, a guy who's not up here and who really deserves, like, it was a thankless role of Tom McCarthy, of the reporter who was the fabulist who makes it up. Mm-hmm. But the reason that, what we're trying to say, what the writers were trying to say there was, even when you get close to something like this, people use it as a grist for melodrama, for the things that, like, you know, like let's revel in some gangsters, or let's have some tough cops, or let's enjoy the violence, or let's have the thrill of the chase or the ticking time bomb. And, you know, it was like there was a little part of me that wanted to say, pay attention to what gets pulled through the keyhole and what doesn't. Because what we just said was these 4 seasons, the previous 4 seasons, and what you've seen of this last season are the part of the iceberg that's under the water. And and in this one show, it sort of poked up above the water, and we actually made sort of a meta comment about all the stories. You know, what happens in that season was all the stuff never gets told. The newspaper's full of sort of empty, you know, with the exception of one good story at the end about Bubbles and it was really a part of us that wanted to say we used it to good effect. And now to do another season or something where it would just be, well, we're sustaining the franchise. You know, if they want more, Bubbles, let's get Bubbles. Bubbles starts getting high again. You know, but then he'll get clean again, and then the Bubbles is, you know, maybe he dies, but then his twin brother is like, you know, and then Stringer comes back, and you know, and Omar really wasn't dead. Like, you know, sustaining the franchise is the great disease of American television. And so, we'll all do something else. We'll build a barn in the backyard, and we'll make a new story, and we'll all be in it, and it'll be fine.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, me too. I have to add something here. There's not been enough conversation about how great this freaking writing was. You keep pointing out these scenes.
There's been plenty.
No, I just don't. I don't know.
I've wallowed in it quite well, thank you.
No, I just feel like we've been talking a lot about, you know, the scenes in terms of the actors and how they affected us and what was, but, you know, that chess scene, the bag and the bottles, there's so many scenes that were literary. So how you make it, you know, create a piece of, you know, television that reaches the common person up from all walks of life and also is literary. Has there ever been any conversation around like publishing the scripts so you could read the scripts as though it were a novel? I think that'd be.
I think it'd be great to publish.
I think that would be fascinating.
That would be great. I would like that.
And I just want to thank you because I want to tag on to this comment that you were having about what story. We had this conversation because somewhere, I don't know if you and I had this conversation, David, or I heard this from Ed or someone. We were at the end of the 3rd season, I think, and Stringer was dying, and there was, you know, we were always talking about why, you know, why all this stuff is happening, and Stringer was basically like the hope of that Barksdale family, you know, and I don't know if you and I had this conversation, or I think we did, or maybe it came through just, you know, talk, you know, on the set, but there was, I believe you told me at one point, will be all the. Something about, it wasn't maybe about Stringer, but every season ended so bleakly. And there was some talk about, because there's, and this is paraphrasing probably, it reflects that there is no hope in the ghetto. And initially I took offense to that. And you and I had a conversation about it, I think around the time you were having this, you know, you were processing this other piece. And then it hit me. Later, after I started doing, you know, the work in Baltimore communities, it isn't. Yes, the greater question that the show put to humanity is why is there no hope in the ghetto for some people, for a certain population of people in this country? Why is that? And we need to put that underneath the microscope because. And David, in your, you know, in your recent appearances and in your blog, you know, you talk a lot about why why these circumstances and situations exist for certain people, and that's what the show, ultimately was all about, and the great purpose of the show, and why it's been such an honor to be a part of something that really enlightened and awakened Americans to what is really happening in this country. The unfairness, the injustice, and the fact that people shouldn't have to be put in these positions to make these choices that really, are no-win situations. And to be a part of a project like that, that's had such an impact throughout the world, but in this country, we wouldn't be looking at education the way we're looking at it if it wasn't for this fourth season. This fourth season spurred people to action. When you're out there in activist circles, which I was involved in for a few years, you start to realize that the change agents who are out there trying to change policy and create programming and whatnot to make this world, make this country better, were so influenced by this show and what David and the writers' room and the producers did. There's no greater honor as an actor to be able to be a part of a project that changes lives and awakens and enlightens and entertains. That's why I'm here. It's such a...
All right, I think we have time for at least a couple of questions. Does anyone have one? Right back there. Just wait for the microphone, please, so that people on the live stream can hear you.
Hi, I'm all the way from San Diego. I made it a point to get on a plane and use my miles to come to this. I do not understand why there was no Emmy for this show. Maybe because it was too real. But I loved it. I love it. I have every season. I watch it. I rewatch it. My husband loves it too. He couldn't get the miles, so that's why he's in San Diego. But I love the show, and I love the cast. And thank you so much for having this, Paley.
All right. So way in the back in the white shirt.
Hi, this question is for David. Thank you guys so much for everything you've said. And, I drove, I didn't come from San Diego, but I drove from upstate New York, where I was actually negotiating standards for the nurses union that I work for around Ebola, around Ebola protocols. But my question is really, I read one time, David, that you said the one thing that this show was trying to say was that we had to end the drug war. And subsequent to that, I've seen other things that you've written in your blog, and as a person who personally was greatly affected by the drug war, as a veteran of the drug war, with a conviction and everything, I relate to that. But I'm wondering would you say now that the more important thing that this show was saying was really relating to the issue of income inequality and the level of inequality that exists in this society?
Yeah, I think I did enough interviews. Let me say this. If the show had had the Sopranos ratings, I probably could have been a lot more enigmatic and done a lot less interviews and just said, the show is about what you think it's about. But I had to sell like a motherfucker to get anybody, I was like, I'm doing like, and this is a deer, and so, here's Charles de Gaulle. I mean, the amount of shtick I had to do, right up to the end, because the show was always in danger of not being renewed. I said the show was about a lot of stuff. And I don't think I ever said the show was about something it wasn't about, but I was always grabbing onto something that was, okay, we're doing education, so now it'll be. But I think it's fair to say the show was most overtly about the failure of the drug war, because that was the universe that we were spending a lot of time in, and it's, it was a point of, it was where the rubber hit the road in terms of narrative. But yeah, it's about the other America. It's about the people that got left behind. That runs through all 5 episodes. And it's about the fact that we are now very comfortable living and experiencing different qualitative and different cultures, societies and cultures. I live 20 blocks away from a completely different Baltimore. And that schizophrenia, on the part of our society, I don't think is sustainable. And I look at sort of the libertarian impulse that has become almost a subtext of our political structure of, I'm not giving. I got mine. Fuck you. That's become the culture of a fading society, of a second-rate society. And I think, ultimately, hard choices have to be made, and a hard decision, a hard definitive decision has to be made of, are we all in this together, or are we not? And I think The Wire was depicting a dystopia where we are not.
Right down in front, right there.
In the public imaginary of the drug trade, we usually see in television represented drug lords or drug traffickers that come from Latin America and cross the border and bring their damage and violence across. And yet in The Wire, I don't remember a Latin American character ever being present in the drama at all. And I was, for me, that was very refreshing, to see.
Let some other ethnic group bear the burden.
Right. So I was wondering.
Somebody else's turn.
I was wondering how deliberate was that decentering of the imaginary of the drug trade being a domestic issue entirely and a systemic issue within the U.S.
I can do this really quickly. Baltimore is a city that is 65% African American. Until the last 10 years, we had a very, very strangely minor, like 2-3% Latino population. It almost like Chicago, very heavy Latino population. New York, everything on the East Coast, Philadelphia. There was something about Baltimore until relatively recently, in the last decade or so. There was just no presence.
All my years growing up there, I never met a Latin person in Baltimore. Through all my years of school,
right.
I never met.
Now on Upper Broadway in Southeast, now you do. But we used to have more. I'm not kidding. Like there was a bigger community of Lumbee Indians. That was a huge thing in Southeast Baltimore. Lumbee, a whole tribe from Lumberton, North Carolina, that came up and settled for the war work in the 40s. We had thousands and thousands of Lumbee Indians, and nobody from Mexico or from Puerto Rico or anywhere in Latin America. It's a weird city, but so we were just following what we knew,
All right, right over there in the glasses. Just wait for the microphone, please. Sorry, down there. So, many people are wearing glasses. My apologies.
Hi, I'm Maureen. I came all the way from Brooklyn, by the way. I was here a few years ago when you did the thing here, and I asked you why you used the same song by different artists for the first 3 seasons, and you told me no special reason. And then I was reading Stealing Life, and you had a 2-page explanation of why you used the different.
Why did you lie to her, David?
But I just want to say thank you for the writing, thank you for Treme, thank you for depicting addicts as people, because nobody gets that right. Nobody gets that right. They're always one-dimensional heroes or martyrs, and
Andre should be here. He should.
But thank you.
He'd have jumped up for
thank
that.
you all for The Wire. It was tremendous.
Okay. We're going to go now to the other woman in the glasses who was standing before.
Just because I've had this question for such a long time, and this is my only chance to ask it. So you said, what was the scene that really encapsulated The Wire? And as a writer, what had always occurred to me was the scene where Brother Mouzone goes into the gay bar looking for Omar, and Rawls is sitting at the bar. And what did what it did for me, first of all, I went, oh my God, that's why he's such a fucking asshole. Because he's in the closet. But the other thing was, it made me feel like all of these characters had lives that I never got to see, but that you knew they were there, David Simon. And I guess what I want to know is, when did you know that?
What?
About
Rawls is gay?
Yeah. When?
We don't know that for sure.
Well, okay. Absolutely could have been there doing police work.
He was there, in an undercover capacity.
I can comment on that because nobody told me that was going to happen. So I arrived on the set. The AD came running over with this big shit-eating grin on his face and said, have you read the new script? And I went, no. And Ed Burns was sitting there, and all of a sudden his head popped up. And he grabbed me, he pulled me into a room on the side, and he said, this is what we're thinking about doing. You know, we may not do it, but how do you feel about it? And I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't mean a goddamn thing what I think about it. They're gonna do it, they're gonna do it. So I said, yeah, well, yeah, okay, that sounds good.
The answer, yeah, that is the fair answer.
One episode more went by, and nothing was said. Another episode went by, and nothing was said, and I'm thinking, what are they gonna do with this? So I decided to really embrace it. I went up to David, called him aside. I said, David, I don't know what your plans are for this, you know, this gay thing, but I'm open for anything. You can be as courageous as you want. And David just looked at me like this. And walked away. And in his brilliance, he never touched it again. He just planted the seed.
All right, much as I would love to take so many more questions, they're going to kick us out of the room. Thank all of you from the cast and producers for being here.